All right, strap yourselves in because today we are going deep on that crazy SpaceX Starship test flight.
Yeah, it was definitely a wild one.
I mean, talk about a visual spectacle.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it kind of shows you just how hard it is to, reach for the stars, so to speak.
Right, like pushing the boundaries of space travel, there's always that element of risk.
Totally.
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't been glued to their screens watching this thing unfold, we're talking about the second test flight of Starship.
Starship.
Elon Musk's big dream, a fully reusable spacecraft that he hopes will someday take us to Mars and the Moon.
It's a pretty big departure from how we usually do things in space travel.
Yeah, how so?
Well, most rockets are designed to be used just once,
Oh, right.
but Starship is meant to be more like a workhorse,
I like that.
coming and going just like a commercial airliner.
So you're saying that reusability factor is key to making space travel more affordable, right?
Exactly. More affordable and sustainable in the long run.
It's like the difference between buying a new car every time you want to grab some groceries versus having one you can just, gas up and go.
A much better deal for your wallet in the long run.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And this particular test flight, well, they launched it from Texas right before sunset.
Oh, wow.
And the visuals were just breathtaking. I mean, a gigantic rocket shooting up against that fiery sky. You just can't beat it for sheer drama.
You're not wrong about that, although, as we know, things didn't quite go to plan.
Yeah, there were definitely some bumps along the way, shall we say.
We shall.
So the first stage, that massive, super heavy booster, it actually landed perfectly.
I know, it was amazing.
Came back down to the pad, guided by those giant robotic arms. It was almost surreal to watch.
Yeah, that landing was a huge win for SpaceX, To give you an idea, those reusable boosters could save them tens of millions of dollars per launch.
Wow, that's a lot of dough.
It is, and that kind of cost reduction is crucial if we want to make missions to Mars a real possibility, not just something, some billionaire dreams about.
Yeah. So score one for SpaceX, but then things took a bit of a turn with the main spacecraft.
Ah, yes, the main event.
Several engines shut down during the ascent, and it started spinning out of control.
Yeah, those Raptor engines are still a work in progress, it seems.
What makes them so tricky?
Well, for starters, they're incredibly complex machines with thousands of parts all working together perfectly.
Thousands.
Yeah, even the tiniest variation in fuel flow or pressure can cause big problems.
That's intense.
It is. SpaceX is constantly tweaking the design, but perfecting those engines is definitely one of their biggest challenges.
And this isn't the first time they've had issues with Starship exploding.
It's true, this wasn't their first rodeo with a fiery ending.
Their first test flight also didn't exactly stick the landing.
It's important to remember, though, that failure is part of the game when you're pushing the boundaries of technology, especially in a field as complex as space travel.
Okay, but they literally lost track of the spacecraft after it went radio silent. Nobody seems to know for sure where it ended up, kind of unsettling, right?
It does raise some eyebrows, for sure, about the whole tracking and monitoring of these experimental spacecraft.
I mean, it's not like losing your car keys.
Right, exactly. And there are legitimate concerns about the environmental impact of uncontrolled reentry, with debris potentially scattering all over the place.
Not good.
No, not at all.
But I have to admit, the SpaceX commentator's response was pretty funny.
Oh, what did they say?
Something like, well, this happened last time, too, so we've had some practice.
Haha, that's great. Even in the face of a setback, a little humor can go a long way.
It's that classic fail fast, fail often mentality, I guess. But this does raise a big question. What does this mean for NASA's moon landing plans?
Right, because they're counting on Starship to get astronauts back on the lunar surface.
Exactly. And after this, well, you have to wonder.
Yeah, you can't ignore the risks of relying on a spacecraft with, let's just say a colorful history of landings, especially when you've got human lives on the line. Yeah, the stakes are definitely a lot higher when you think about it that way.
And it's not just about the moon missions either, right?
Right.
I mean, Elon Musk's ultimate goal is to use Starship to go to Mars.
Mars.
This recent test flight is like a wake-up call, a reminder of just how difficult it's going to be to develop a spacecraft that can handle interplanetary travel.
Oh, yeah, the challenges are huge.
Speaking of Mars, it's kind of ironic that this test flight also had those 4 mock Starlink satellites on board.
The Starlink satellites?
Yeah, those satellites that beam internet back to Earth? They were supposed to be deployed during the flight.
Oh, right.
Almost like a cosmic joke. Those satellites got a little taste of space before being destroyed along with the spacecraft.
Talk about a rough first day at work, right?
But even with these explosions, SpaceX isn't just randomly launching rockets. They have a whole strategy of continuous improvement.
Yeah, they're very methodical about it.
Every test flight, whether it's a success or not, it all feeds into their design process.
It's all data for them.
So even this crash is valuable information for them. They're going to analyze every single detail to figure out what went wrong and how to prevent it from happening again.
That's the SpaceX way. Fail fast, learn faster.
And it's not just about fixing what broke into me. They're always looking for ways to improve performance, to push the limits even further.
They never settle.
And hey, let's not forget that landing the Super Heavy booster was a major achievement.
Oh, absolutely a huge step forward.
Like they're solving the puzzle one piece at a time.
And that booster landing, it's also important because it shows that reusable rockets can actually be economically viable.
Right, making them more affordable.
Exactly. Think about it. If we can reduce the cost of launching stuff into space, it opens up a whole world of possibilities, not just for scientific research, but for commercial applications too.
So it's not just about space exploration, it's about the business of space.
Right. It's like the early days of aviation flights were expensive and risky, but they eventually became something we take for granted.
Imagine that one day we might be hopping on a Starship for a weekend trip to orbit.
It's definitely within the realm of possibility. There are still hurdles to overcome. Of course, safety being the biggest one.
Of course.
But SpaceX's ambition and their willingness to challenge the status quo are truly remarkable.
Okay, let's get a little more technical for a minute. You mentioned those Raptor engines being a bit temperamental.
Temperament.
Can you break down the challenges of building engines that are powerful enough to get a spacecraft all the way to Mars?
Sure. Well, the Raptor engine uses what's called a full-flow staged combustion cycle.
Full-flow staged combustion cycle.
It's super efficient, but incredibly complex. It's like a supercharged internal combustion engine. But instead of powering a car, it generates the thrust needed to escape Earth's gravity.
Got it.
But even the tiniest imperfection in any of the thousands of parts can mess up the whole system.
Thousands of parts.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
So it's not just about raw power. It's about building an engine that can operate perfectly under immense stress and in crazy environments.
Absolutely, and those engines have to fire reliably multiple times once to lift off from the launch pad and then again to power the descent back to Earth.
I see.
Plus, they're exposed to extreme temperatures from the scorching heat of liftoff to the freezing cold of space. It's a crazy engineering challenge.
And then there's the whole re-entry problem.
Re-entry?
I mean, watching Starship come plummeting back through the atmosphere is pretty terrifying even when it's supposed to happen.
Re-entry is definitely one of the most dangerous parts of any spaceflight.
I can imagine.
Picture this, a spacecraft hurtling toward Earth at thousands of miles per hour. The friction with the atmosphere creates insane heat enough to melt most metals.
Like a controlled meteor shower.
It's a delicate balancing act. SpaceX uses a heat shield made of special ceramic tiles to protect the spacecraft from those extreme temperatures.
Like a giant oven mitt.
Ha! Something like that. But even with the heat shield, the forces involved are immense.
So how do they keep Starship from burning up on re-entry?
It's a combination of things. The shape of the spacecraft is designed to minimize drag and distribute heat evenly. The heat shield itself is incredibly tough. It can handle temperatures up to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And then there's the control system.
The control system.
Yeah, Starship uses aerodynamic flaps and thrusters to maneuver during re-entry, adjusting its trajectory and making sure it comes down at the right angle and speed.
It's like trying to steer a hot frying pan back down to Earth.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
It requires incredibly precise calculations and super fast adjustments. SpaceX is constantly refining those control algorithms, using data from each test flight to improve performance and safety.
Yeah, it makes you realize just how crucial those control systems are.
Yeah.
One miscalculation and it's all over.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And remember, it's not just about surviving re-entry, it's about landing safely and being able to use the spacecraft again.
Right, because that's the whole idea behind Starship, to make a space transportation system that's sustainable and affordable.
Exactly. It's kind of like the difference between a single-use plastic bottle and a reusable water bottle.
Ah, I see what you mean. One's convenient but wasteful. The other takes a bit more effort, but it's better for the planet and your bank account in the long run.
Exactly. And that's what SpaceX is going for, that long-term vision. They're not just focused on launching rockets, they're trying to build a future where space travel is normal.
It's a pretty amazing goal when you stop and think about it, and they seem to be making real progress despite the occasional, fireball.
They're definitely pushing the boundaries.
But let's zoom out for a second and consider the big picture. What does all this mean for the future of space exploration?
I think we're seeing a real shift in how things are done for decades. Space exploration was mostly controlled by governments and national space agencies, but now private companies like SpaceX are stepping in.
They're shaking things up.
Yeah, they're driving innovation and setting some seriously ambitious goals.
It's like the space race has been rebooted, but this time it's not about national pride. It's about making space accessible to everyone.
Exactly, and that's incredibly exciting. Imagine a future with regular flights to Mars, space tourism becoming a reality, scientific research happening in orbit and beyond.
It sounds like science fiction, but SpaceX is making it seem more and more possible.
They are.
But for our listener who's been following this whole Starship saga, is it the real deal or just a really expensive fireworks display?
It's still too early to say for sure. There are still plenty of challenges, technical and financial, but SpaceX has shown that they're willing to take risks, to learn from their mistakes, and to keep pushing the limits.
It's that boldness that makes them so fascinating to watch, even when things go boom.
And I think that's an important point. Space exploration is inherently risky. There will be setbacks, there will be failures, but it's through those challenges that we learn and grow and eventually accomplish incredible things.
So even if Starship never makes it to Mars, the lessons learned along the way will pave the way for future breakthroughs, maybe even inspire the next generation of space explorers.
Exactly, and I think that's something worth celebrating: the pursuit of knowledge, the drive to explore, the courage to go beyond what we know. That's what makes us human. That's what will ultimately lead us to the stars.
Well said. And on that note,
Yeah.
I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Before we go, I want to leave our listener with one last thought. We've talked about the technology, the risks, the potential rewards, but the fundamental question is, what role do you see for humanity in space? Is it our destiny to become a multiplanetary species, or are we meant to stay here on our home planet?
That's a big question with no easy answers, but it's definitely worth thinking about. The choices we make now will affect the course of human history for generations to come.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of SpaceX and Starship. Until next time, keep looking up.